It's that time of the week, ladies and gentlemen. A new alpha build has hit the alpha servers and we now have access to a few new classes and talents that we can test. And today we'll be looking at Frost Mage and see if Frost Mage is going to be a beast in Dragonflight. It's not. Or if it's not going to be a beast in Dragonflight, it's not going to be a beast. What? It's fine. It's just early numbers and we will take a look at pretty much everything so far. And of course, starting with the talents and everything that changed, spells, baselines, access to all sorts of utility, all in today's video. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and enable those notifications if you like this content and you want to see more of it in the coming days, weeks, months, and so on, because we will be covering pretty much everything, every spec that's being put on alpha and that we can get our hands on. So if you like our content and you want to support us a little bit more, you click those little 3 things. It takes you a couple of seconds. You could have done that 5 times by now. I've counted, I know. And now we can actually move on into the Frost Mage. Now, a big fat disclaimer, I'm not a main Frost Mage. I've known the basics of Frost Mage for a while and I can play it at an average level and I can understand how the spec works. And moving into Dragonflight, I am a bit confused. Alright, considering how many posts we've been having about all the other classes and specs and tuning and changes and talents moving around and putting out talents, taking out, putting back in, stuff like that, it's likely that a lot of this stuff is going to change. And of course, based on how you're doing your content and how you're building your Frost Mage, some of these talents that might seem weird or might seem overpowered might change in terms of how they synergize with the rest of the talent tree. First of all, since this is the first Mage video that we're doing, let's quickly talk about the general talent tree for Mage. And off the bat, the general Mage tree starts with Ice Barrier, right? It's called Ice Barrier? It is Ice Barrier. And if you do change to all the other specs, the barrier changes based on spec. So I think this is the first class where the general talent tree changed depending on the spec, but only the first one that you start with because, you know, gotta keep that flavor going. And of course, the first couple of options are pretty basic. You got Ice Block, which is probably going to be mandatory no matter what, Cone of Cold, which is not, and Invisibility, which debatable. And if you look down the tree, there's some crossovers, there's some decent pathing. It's nice. You get a couple of options to access the utility, and then you can spread out to the different capstones, which you might recognize Shifting Power as the Night Elf capstone, because if you really think about it, I don't know if Mage, I was honestly hoping we would get Skeleton Mage from Necrolords. That would have been so cool, but I guess if they're ever going to do a future Necromancer type class, that's gonna conflict in terms of design, so maybe leave that on the table, which actually might be interesting to know that we might actually get a Lich class Necromancer stuff in the future. Are we going to get, did I call it? This is 2022 Flame. July the 27th, as of recording this video, called it Necromancer / Lich class in the future. But with that out of the way, you will also notice that you have Meteor there, which is a core mage. I mean, it's not really a capstone, but it's like one of the defining talents for Fire Mage, so it's a little bit weird that it's there. I guess we'll talk about that once we get into the Fire Mage. And another interesting one is Time Anomaly, where Icy Veins for 8 seconds. At any moment, you have a chance to gain Icy Veins for 8 seconds, or Fingers of Frost, or Time Warp for 6 seconds. Time Anomaly being the capstone, which is interesting. It keeps the spec flowing. It has that really wild card feel to it, and that can keep things fresh. A couple of things that I do want to point out. Shimmer doesn't work because I have tested out. So right in the middle, you have to choose between Ice Flows and Shimmer. I haven't checked Arcane yet, but normally this row also has Slipstream for Arcane. And seeing as we don't have Slipstream here, I can imagine it's either there or not at all, but that's for another video. And overall, the talent tree is not that particularly nasty. You do have a couple of capstones, well, not capstones, but usually the stat talents. You have the critical strike chance on the left hand side, Time of Ronin, or Tome of Ronin rather, and then Tome of Antonidas gives you haste. On the right hand side, you have some damage reduction talents and a lot of utility. You'll recognize Mirror Image, Slow, Spell Steal, and Alter Time, kind of like at the top half part of the talent tree. There's some interesting synergies with Mirror Image, which actually makes it a more interesting cooldown to use. You can either reduce its overall cooldown whenever a Mirror Image gets dissipated if you take direct damage, or you can actually heal yourself if that ever happens, which is interesting. I don't know how often you will take direct damage in a PvE content where this could, you know, be useful, but it's probably more for PvP, but is what it is. Another very important talent that you will have to take is right smack dab in the middle, where you have Rune of Power and Incanter's Flow. You can choose between the two, and if you do take Rune of Power, then Icy Veins will pop a Rune of Power as well. At least it says so in the tooltip. There's a lot of things that don't really work, and yeah, I'm not saying that this doesn't work. I've actually was so engrossed into the fight because we did test the new dungeon that I wasn't able to tell if Icy Veins puts down a Rune of Power. I'm a professional mage. I know what I'm doing. It's fine. You will notice some return spells. Blast Wave on the right-hand side, which is, you know, an old Fire Mage spell. And I'm not sure if you might ever want to take this. I mean, it's pretty much CC, but it does do a lot of damage. Although Mass Polymorph is interesting, which, again, I don't know where you would use this, but I can imagine some quirky dungeon pathing and brooding with Mass Polymorph. That can be really cool. I don't know. I don't think Polymorph gets into combat. Does it get you into combat? I don't remember, but you can probably definitely cheese this because it's a minute skip and it's probably pretty good. You'll notice a lot of other stuff. Cooldown reduction for Blink. You have Ice Nova. You have movement speed and invisibility and stuff like that. So outside of like Shifting Power, Time Anomaly, and Meteor, Dragon's Breath at the end of the talent tree, it's a mix of throughput and a mix of defensives. At first glance, it kind of looks a little bit all over the place, but they're mixed in so well where the majority of your utility and maybe major power increases is pretty much early on, and later on you can actually choose the capstone that you want to go for, which is probably not that bad considering that, let's say, stuff like Rune of Power, which would be probably very important for any build, or Incanter's Flow. For some reason, Incanter's Flow will probably be better. Those are accessible pretty early on, as well as the Decurse, as well as the Purge, as well as the Slow, and, you know, the defensive cooldowns are all at the top. And the further down you go, the more utility you unlock, and the capstones are Throughput, which, I mean, if this is the talent tree, then that's great. It's a little bit inconsistent where you have Throughput, defensives, Throughput, utility, Throughput, more utility and stuff like that. So I guess it is what it is. Frost Mage. And now we're going into the actual talent tree. Off the bat, there's a couple of question marks here. First of all, which I didn't mention prior, in the general talent tree, you have Shatter, where you get the a part of the Shatter combo where, you know, whenever you hit a frozen target, your spell's critical chance is increased by 1.5 times, and on top of that you add 25%. Normally that's 50%, but the other 25% is in the Frost spec tree. Why? And it's not yet implemented on alpha, meaning that it does not work. So I have played a Glacial Spike build and a bunch of other stuff, and just throwing out my Glacial Spike and not critting is just so weird. Even with the stat squish, it just feels very weird, but I digress. There's another talent way down in the Frost where I'm going to talk about stuff that doesn't really work from what I was able to test, which is nothing, actually. On the left-hand side of the middle part of the tree, there's a gap, which there's a talent that will probably go there. I don't know what's planned to go there. It obviously has 2 ranks. The fact that it has 2 ranks either is because they need to make up the amount of points that need to go in there, or they actually have a talent in mind, but they haven't been able to put it in, which I guess, well, is what it is. Another talent that doesn't work, which is part of the normal Frost Mage kit, is Freezing Rain, which is further down the row. I've tested it. I've thrown so many Frozen Orbs because it's one of my favorite builds. For Frost Mage, it does not make Blizzard instant. Another talent that's a little bit weird, and that's new, it's Snowstorm. And this I was initially excited for until I've actually seen the effect. So what Snowstorm does is whenever Blizzard deals damage, it has a chance, 30% chance to increase the damage of your next Cone of Cold, and it stacks all the way up to 20 times. I don't know how the tooltip functions, because if you put more points, it seems like it adds more and more damage, but I feel like when I was testing it in the alpha, it only took into account 1 point placed into it. And there's a lot of talents that work that way, where they give you a bonus, and if you put and if the bonus is acquired by stacking up a couple of points, it usually is only activated on 1 point. This is not the only spec that has this issue. I don't know if it's a tooltip issue. I don't know if it's just a bug that doesn't add the extra stacks. I don't know if it should or not, but I digress. Snowstorm is supposed to kind of make Cone of Cold relevant, because I am a fan of the old mage style, the classic Cone of Cold. It was classic for me, man, and it's still dog shit. Jesus fucking Christ, it does almost nothing. So off the bat, this is kind of like 3 dead points. Unless, and it might have something to do with maybe the baseline scaling of Cone of Cold, because Cone of Cold is pretty dog shit. Which obviously can either be influenced by increasing the baseline damage of Cone of Cold, which might work differently for the other mage specs, I don't know, since that's in the general talent tree, that's where Cone of Cold is. Or they could obviously buff Snowstorm even more. I would love to see Snowstorm work because I feel like Cone of Cold is a really interesting Frost Mage spell. It definitely adds a different dynamic. You're not just Frost Bolting and Ice Lancing and Flurrying. You can Cone of Cold every now and again. It won't become like a rotational part of your combat. You just press it every couple of seconds whenever it comes off cooldown, but you do have to stack it up. So I think Snowstorm as a concept is good. It does dig damage so far, but again, numbers are subject to change. That can, you know, be different once alpha actually is released. Now, one of the most interesting things that I was able to see, and I'm not sure if there's something that I've missed, because I mentioned I'm not like a main Frost Mage player, but I do know the concept of shattering spells and using flurry and travel time of spells to kind of take advantage of Winter Shield and so that, although they kind of worked that out of the rotation, if I'm not mistaken, in the last couple of patches. However, flurry now is instant cast baseline. I don't know if that's by design or if that's how it's supposed to be, because if that is how it's supposed to be, that's actually kind of cool, because you don't need to wait for Brain Freeze procs to launch your flurry. And if you do get Brain Freeze proc, which is a talent that you have to get into further down the list, then you just reset the cooldown and you make it do more damage, if I'm not mistaken. And also you will have to talent into which is so okay. Just to point it out, since we are here, before we go further into the talent tree, there's a couple of things that are so fundamentally crucial for Frost Mage that you're always gonna have to pick, which I guess it kind of goes into how they designed the talent tree. So what I mean is Winter's Chill, Shatter, Flurry, Brain Freeze, and of course you can argue Fingers of Frost as well, are pretty much quintessential for Frost, and you will never not take them, so they're not really options, right? On the right-hand side of the tree where you have Shatter, you can go to Frostbite and then Arctic Piercing if you want to go that route, but you don't have to if you don't want to. However, on the left-hand side, you do have to take Brain Freeze and you do have to take Winter Chill. I mean, more so since the spec has been designed around these core passives working together in unison, to give you a flow of the rotation, obviously proper throughput and all of that. But obviously it depends on how they tune them. If they make shattering spells just like an afterthought, then maybe it's not that important. But if we're gonna take the mage in the concept that we know, that we've been known for so long, this will be a non-choice. You're definitely gonna have to pick them. And obviously we go into Cold Snap, which is weird because Cold Snap is right smack dab in the middle, and you have to take that as well because it unlocks further throughput talents. Which, I mean, I don't know, I guess, sure, but it's a little bit all over the place. Anyway, the interesting part that I was gonna go into is around Flurry, and if you keep going down the talent tree, you will go to Perpetual Winter, which gives Flurry 2 charges. This is cool because Flurry is also instant, which means this adds a new dynamic to the Frost rotation, which I totally support. It feels fine if this is how Frost ends up being played, since I'm sure the theory crafters and the big brain Frost Mages in the Altar Time Discord are gonna really theory craft the shit out of this thing. We've only been able to test it a couple of dungeons and just bring in this content really quick to you guys. But take that in with a grain of salt, pinch of salt. It's not how I'm probably gonna say it, but the way I see it is you will constantly rotate Flurry through your rotation and maybe even always consume all the charges, I guess, depending on the playstyle that you do. The way I tested it, especially with Glacial Spike, since if you do play stuff like Glacial Spike, which is all the way the capstone to the bottom right-hand side of the talent tree, you will always want a Flurry stack for Glacial Spike. So if you have something like that, or if you go with Ebon Bolt, which was historically another spell that you wanted to shatter, then you'd probably keep one of the Flurry charges and then use that. But then when you get Brain Freeze proc, you get both the charges back, and if you're not ready, you might overcap on the potential reset of Flurry. So that's an interesting dynamic that we're gonna have to see how it plays out in combat. What this means is that you'll just shatter more spells than before instead of just casting Frostbolt until you get Brain Freeze procs. Since I don't remember if there was ever a time where Frost Mage efficiently would just nakedly cast Flurry. And that would be, you know, like a good DPS gain. It's pretty much as I've known Frost Mage over the years, it was always cast Flurry once you have Brain Freeze proc, but now since it's instant and you have 2 charges, this whole dynamic changes, which I think is fucking really cool, and props to this, more of this, more of this. If you go down the talent tree, similar to Blood Decay, you have the Icy Veins, the main cooldown in the middle, and the further down you go, the more you come to play the live version of Frost Mage, especially if you go a little bit to, so you get Icy Veins, and underneath it you have Icy Propulsion, which it's the conduit, but it's boring, it's weird. I actually don't like how they're designing and spacing out these points and how the route is to get them. Because you do have on the right-hand side going down, you have Chain Reaction, and then you have Thermal Void, right? So that's probably going into how, you know, Frost Mage has been playing for the last couple of patches, where you constantly extend Icy Veins while constantly being in combat, which is a fun playstyle. If people like to play that, go for it. That's pretty neat. On the left-hand side, it's a little bit weird because you have improved Icy Veins that increases the Icy Veins duration for... So I guess no matter where you go, you get more Icy Veins. It's more Icy Veins on the right, more Icy Veins on the left. It's a little bit weird. It feels like a lazy talent. I don't know. That's all I'm gonna say. Maybe it's a lazy talent. Maybe the extra 3 seconds that you would get from it just matters so much that it changed the whole dynamic. But I don't know. It seems lazy. And if you go down there, you have Slick Ice. When Icy Veins is active, each Frostbolt you cast reduces the cast time of Frostbolt by 2% and increases the damage by 2%, stacking up to 10 times, which is kind of nice, I guess. It's an altering way of playing the rotation, and there are a bunch of Frostbolt fuel talents that you can get going towards this, but they're pretty kind of out of the way, slightly maybe, so I don't know if the position of Slick Ice here is the best, or the fact that there are Frostbolt fuels that are on different sides of the tree that might make it a little bit awkward to get both. So I don't know about that. Plus you have Freezing Winds, which we've known so far. While Frozen Orb is active, you gain Fingers of Frost. My problem with this is that Freezing Rain doesn't work, so I couldn't properly play a Frozen Orb build. Not to mention, there is a new talent on the right-hand side, which I was actually hoping to test out to see in play, which is Ice 9. And I don't know if this was ever a thing for Frost Mages prior to me actually getting deeper into the spec, but this doesn't seem to work. I've tested on a Freezing training dummy for minutes and minutes on end. I couldn't see those 15 icicles, so I would imagine this is a bug, which kind of sucks because it seems super fucking interesting, man. You just fire, and by putting 2 points, 30 icicles, and that's pretty cool. I could definitely, if that works, I could definitely see that into building a very, very heavy mastery-focused Frost Mage, where you just have like fucking icicles all over the place. And of course, you will see Splitting Ice going down the road, and Hailstones, also more Icelands, more icicles, and then you get Glacial Spike. I've played Glacial Spike and Frozen Orb have been 2 of my favorite Frost Mage playstyles for years and years and years, and I'm sad that Glacial Spike hasn't been particularly amazing in Shadowlands, but playing it with it now, as opposed to playing last time with it, you do seem to get more Glacial Spikes, probably because of Hailstones, which is actually really cool because Glacial Spike is nice, but it doesn't feel like it's tuned properly, since Glacial Spike feels like it's kind of doing around Earth Shock level damage. If we're gonna compare it to another caster that we know, it's kind of doing the same damage as maybe an Earth Shock, which I don't feel it should. I feel like it should do a lot more. It's a very long cast, and as we were testing it in the new dungeon, there are so many mechanics. I think at one point I've got interrupted 4 times casting this. I had flurry stacks. I was like casting my Glacial Spike and making sure that I launch a flurry soon after. I got interrupted in my Glacial Spike and I launched Naked Flurry, and I did that 3 more times. It was fucking horrible. But I digress. For a long cast time spell that actually requires a little bit of build up, I feel like Glacial Spike is a little bit undertuned. Numbers are numbers, it's still early alpha. And on the bottom left-hand side of the tree, you have Cold Front, which is the capstone for Frost. It's similar to what Fire has, where if you cast 30 Frostbolts or Flurries, you call down a Frozen Orb on your target, hitting an enemy player. This is Meteor for Fire Mage, if you've played that before. I haven't been able to see it work either. Maybe I just didn't get the proper procs. It was a little bit chaotic, but all in all, Frost Mage has some interesting potential in the types of builds that it has. I personally am happy because I can play some of my favorite playstyles in Frost Mage without having to sacrifice too much. it's interesting. The talents that don't work are a major pain in realizing exactly how Frost Mage feels in Dragonflight, because they're crucial talents like Freezing Rain and Shatter. The fact that those don't work is really weird, considering that there's a lot more talents going into Frozen Orb and Blizzard than before. So having a Frozen Orb style Blizzard playstyle feels so good if it works, but some of them don't work, so it's weird. But once these do get fixed, because they will get fixed, everybody, calm your titties. And I think we've had every week so far at least one post for Hunter talents that have been repaired, so we can definitely have high hopes that Frost Mage is definitely going to be addressed properly in the next couple of weeks. I have high hopes that Frost Mage can become maybe one of the funnest casters to do, since there's so many variants or variety into your playstyles that you can get into, and that's a big plus in my book. But what do you guys think? Do you think that this can be or maybe an upgrade to Frost Mage in terms of playstyle and accessibility to builds and talents and options and all that good stuff for Dragonflight? I think it is. But we will have more and more coverage in the coming weeks, so we'll see how things develop. And hopefully you enjoyed this video and other videos that we do on our channel. And thank you, dear patrons, for supporting the content that we do. More of it is gonna come. Hopefully you're gonna enjoy it. Like, subscribe, notifications. You know the things, man. We say it all the time. Everybody says it all the time. It's for a good reason. Thank you, and see you next time.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.